Hello everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we'll be talking about the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, or BFRDP, the application process. My name is Kristen Aldrich and I'm the National Technical Assistance Manager with New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. For a quick agenda, I'll be giving a very brief overview of New Entry and who we are. We'll jump into the grants.gov process. We'll take a look at the application package. We'll look at grants.gov workspace, and there will be time at the end for questions and some resources to direct you to. So overall today is going to be more of a kind of basic and broader overview of the whole process from beginning to end of getting a grants.gov account and then submitting your application for BFRDP. So just briefly to orient you to the technical controls for WebEx, you have the option in your upper right-hand corner of the screen to change your audio settings. If you're having any trouble with the audio connection, you can change your audio connection from computer to phone or vice versa. And then throughout the presentation, you're welcome to send questions my way. Again, we'll have time at the end for questions. But you can submit any questions using the chat box, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner of WebEx. And you have the option to send it to everyone, all participants, or you can feel free to send it to just myself, the host or presenter. Following up from the webinar, we'll be sending you a link to a follow-up evaluation, also the recorded webinar and presentation slides, as well as other resources that are relevant to the application process for BFRDP. So briefly, New Entry, we are a program of Tufts University and have been around since 1998. We have on-the-ground programming in Massachusetts with farmer training and food access initiatives. Our national team provides support to food systems organizations across the country, which comes in the form of webinars like these, as well as other resource development and tools. And for this particular case, we have an Education Enhancement Team grant from USDA NIFA through BFRDP in order to support applicants of the BFRDP grant program. So through our EET grant, we've been able to develop a number of different resources and webinars. We developed an online self-assessment tool, which you're welcome to take, which helps kind of walk through considerations and assessing readiness to apply for BFRDP. There's an FAQ portal, which is basically a direct line to USDA NIFA staff. They answer any questions that come through there. You can access all of this through the website posted here, nesfp.org/BFRDP. As I'm sure many of you are well aware, BFRDP, the fiscal year 2018 application, is due on February 8th, 2018 at 5 p.m. Eastern. And I thought I'd take a moment to just quickly mention one or two changes to this year's RFA, which you may have seen changed from last year. And probably the most significant one is the just-in-time pilot. There were certain pieces of the application that they were not requiring for the 2017 application for the initial submission. That they were kind of piloting a program called Just in Time. So it was a bit fewer documents that you needed to submit. However, after going through the pilot phase, I guess they have determined not to continue with that program. So Just in Time will not be in effect this year for 2018. Just wanted to make sure I took a moment to say that. One other change, and I have seen this in another NIFA grant program this year, is that they are not requiring the matching support commitment letters to be submitted with your application. You do still need to have your documentation on file for match. You do still need to list all of the matching sources and include your matching budget justification, but they are not requiring those specific letters of matching commitment from folks that might be providing that. So just a couple quick updates for this year's RFA before we jump in. So we're going to really give a high-level overview of, again, all the different aspects of what you will need to do in order to be able to submit to grants.gov. So when you need to make sure that you have a grants.gov account, the first thing to do is to make sure you have a DUNS number. The next step would then be an account for the System for Award Management, or SAM. You'll need to identify an authorized organization representative, and then from there can create a grants.gov account. And I'm sure many of you on the webinar today already have a grants.gov account, so just for the sake of folks that might be new to this, I'm just going to walk through some of the steps for that process. So in order to get a DUNS number, this is a process you only need to do once. You would register through Dun & Bradstreet, and I've included the URL there, fedgov.dnb.com/webform. This process takes 3 to 5 days approximately to receive your DUNS number, and there is no fee to register. Once you have your DUNS number, you can then get a SAM account. So this can take up to 2 weeks if you don't already have your employer identification number. So when you're going into the SAM system, you'll want to make sure you have that handy. This does need to be renewed annually, but the contact person for your SAM account does receive email notifications when it's time to renew. The website is simply sam.gov. And again, with this one, there's no fee to register. You'll need that DUNS number to apply. And then when you create your SAM account, you will at that point appoint an e-business point of contact. Oops. So then on to grants.gov, your e-business point of contact appoints an authorized organization representative. The authorized organization representative then registers with grants.gov, and it's the username and password for your authorized representative that you will use to submit your grants.gov application. Finally, the e-business point of contact confirms the authorized representative's registration, and after that confirmation, the authorized representative is able to submit applications through grants.gov. So that whole process takes some time, as you can probably see and understand. So if you haven't gone through that yet, you do have some time between now and February 8th. So I would definitely suggest getting that process rolling as soon as possible if you don't already have those accounts in place. And I would definitely say, even if you do, go ahead and try logging in. Make sure you can locate the username and password for these various accounts and have easy access to it, because the last thing you'd want is to get to grants.gov just to determine that you were missing some username and password along the way. So once you are all set and are able to log into grants.gov, you can then search for the grant opportunity that you're looking for. So in this case, to search for grants, you can see here on the website, you can go to the Search Grants tab, and you can search by keyword or opportunity number or a number of different filtering fields here. But for this grant opportunity in particular, I've just searched for beginning farmer, and BFRDP is the first grant that comes up. I've also put here the funding opportunity number, which is along the bottom, which you can find again on grants.gov when you search. So once you find the grant opportunity, then it'll bring you to the Synopsis page, which has a bunch of information about this grant. There's version history, there's related documents in another tab, which will include the RFA. And then the last tab is the grant application package. So when you click on that, you will have the opportunity to either apply using Workspace, or you can download the legacy application package. So Workspace is a newer program that grants.gov is using, and it will be required as the way to submit an application starting January 1st of 2018. For this particular grant program, since the RFA is out now and you have the opportunity to download the application package, you are welcome to do so, and you may still use the legacy application package for this particular grant program. But just know that moving forward, you will need to be using Workspace for any grants that come out after the end of this year. So just kind of walking through the steps here of retrieving your application package. You'll download from grants.gov. It's a PDF that has live links to grants.gov, and you'll need to make sure that you have the current version of Adobe Reader, which is a free download, and a PDF generator. And if you are experiencing any difficulties with grants.gov, one kind of first good step to try is to switch browsers. Sometimes there can be compatibility issues, so if you're using Chrome, for example, and are experiencing any difficulties, I'd recommend trying Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox. And for another quick overview about Workspace, some details here. So it is, again, as I mentioned, still optional until the very end of this year. And I pulled some language from grants.gov indicating that any funding opportunities where applicants have downloaded the legacy PDF application package, you'll be able to submit that until March 31st of next year. So again, if for this BFRDP grant opportunity, if you prefer the legacy PDF application or have already downloaded it, you're welcome to submit that through the legacy application package for this grant program. But Workspace, generally speaking, is a tool to help and facilitate collaboration on your application. It allows for multiple people to share the application package as opposed to the legacy PDF application package where you simply download one version, and it can get a bit tricky if you have more than one person wanting to access that information. It's just a bit easier through Workspace online as more of a cloud-based solution. So if you do have multiple collaborators that are all using Workspace, they must all have a grants.gov account. So that might be the one kicker with Workspace. They need to have created a grants.gov account. But either way, you should know that it's all of the same information and all of the same forms that are required for you to fill out. In Workspace, you have the option to use web forms, so it's more of a user-friendly interface online as opposed to the PDF download. But again, it's the same information no matter which way you submit, if it's the legacy PDF or Workspace. So at this point, again, you have the option to choose whichever you prefer. So first I'll kind of walk through the application package. So this might look familiar to folks that are more familiar with the PDF legacy application package. I'll first walk through this, and then we'll move on to Workspace and talk a bit more about that. So when you download the application package from grants.gov using the legacy PDF application package, you'll have the package itself and then also the instructions. So you'll definitely want to download both. But one thing to point out on your application package itself, it does have a show instructions feature, which you can utilize here. And so just looking at some of the application package itself, you'll notice that many of the fields are highlighted with kind of a red trim around the required field. So those are all required. As you go through and complete each of these required fields, they'll change from the highlighted yellow to kind of a blue color. So that's one way to know maybe a bit more quickly or visually what might be missing as you're kind of looking at each page of your application package. And moving along to the budget form of your application package, this is what it looks like. And as you can see at the top, you have the opportunity to select that this is a project budget type as opposed to a subaward. We'll talk about subawards a few more slides down the line. And then you'll set which budget period that you're filling out. So here's where you would enter the start date and the end date of this particular budget period. So if you're applying for more than 1 year, you will have to fill out your budget form for each separate year, indicating if it's budget period 1, 2, etc. So you'll fill out each budget period separately, and then you'll see it all calculates to a cumulative total budget at the end. And I just got a quick question that came through about the start date for this grant, and that's going to be September 30th, 2018. And you can find the language about that on, I believe it's page 30, yeah, page 30 of the RFA, where it says the date specified by the NIFA awarding official as the effective date of the grant shall be no later than September 30th of the federal fiscal year in which the project is approved for support, etc. So I would recommend using September 30th as your start date. And so another quick point about the budget form before I jump to the subaward. You will be required to upload your budget justification in your budget form before moving on to other areas of your application package, or rather moving on to other budget years. So you'll want to fill out budget year 1 and ensure you have your budget justification uploaded to move on to year 2. The application package subaward budget. So just wanted to point out, when you do use the legacy PDF application package, and you will have, and in the case that you have subawards for your grant project, you'll want to, on that first page, which I have circled here on the left-hand side, click on the research and related subaward budget in order to allow that field to then be revealed later in your application package. So you'll want to click that, and then you'll scroll down through your application package to find this page, which is here on the right-hand side of the screen, the R&R subaward budget. And you'll then extract the budget, which looks essentially just the same as the budget form for your project, for the primary budget that you were completing. And you'll just fill that out with all the information from your subaward partner. So once you download that and fill it out, you'll then save it and upload it back into this R&R subaward budget form. So further into the application package is where you'll find the space for you to upload a number of attachments for the application. So you have your project summary abstract, and BFRDP and NIFA have a template that they'd like you to use for the project summary. That is mentioned in the RFA as well as in the NIFA grants.gov instructions. So you can find that link there to get your template and utilize that for the summary. There are specific fields that they want to make sure you're including, and that is also outlined in the RFA. Here's where you can add this attachment. Field 8, of course, is the project narrative. And then field 12 is other attachments. So in field 12 is where you would upload your letters of commitment. The other attachments here, bibliography, facilities and other resources, and equipment, those, of course, you'll want to make sure to upload and attach in those specific places. But again, for other attachments, that's where your letters of commitment, your letters of support will go. So additionally, in your application package, you have your senior key personnel. This is where you'll put specific information about the key personnel that will be involved in your grant project that you're submitting. You'll want to identify their project role, if they're the project director or co-project director or another kind of role. And then you'll want to attach their biographical sketch as well as their current and pending support. The biographical sketch is basically what it sounds like, just some information about the person and why they are why they will be a great addition to your project, what they will bring in particular. And then current and pending support is where you will upload your current and pending attachment, which indicates other grants that this particular person is written into, basically. So they essentially want to see that no one is overcommitted in terms of, maxing out above 100% of their time on other grant projects that they may be working on. So for the BFRDP program, there are two kinds of grants that you can apply for, being the standard grant or the Education Enhancement Team grant. And these are the codes that you would enter for those different kinds of grants, depending what you're applying for. So the funding opportunity name and number will automatically populate, and then you would enter the program code name and the program code. And so as you're filling out your application package, you can check your package for errors along the way. So that will basically communicate what areas of the application you have yet to complete. You can always save along the way, but it is not until you are ready to submit the application that you would then click Save and Submit. And I did just want to point out, as we were talking about attachments, there are requirements that are outlined. This is on page 9 of the NIFA grants.gov application guide. So just some guidelines and requirements to keep in mind as you are putting together these various attachments for your application package. You'll want to make sure that they are all in PDF form. They have some specifications around the font size and the margins of your documents. And then there are a number of specific file names that they give throughout the RFA. So definitely pay close attention to the RFA and the different file names specifically for the various attachments that you need to upload to make sure that you're complying with the specifications that they have outlined. And so for the application package and for when you submit your application, you'll then receive a number of emails that will go to the project director and the AOR. So within 2 days of submission, grants.gov will send a receipt of the application. They will send an application validated or rejected email. And then if validated, grants.gov will notify you that the application has passed on to the agency, which would be NIFA. And then once it's sent to NIFA, you'll receive an email that they have indeed received it and a notification that the application has been accepted or declined for review. So you should get a number of email notifications once you do submit your application. So if you're not receiving those, then you'll want to look into what might be going on. And so I wanted to move on to Workspace and take a look at this program in particular. So when you go to grants.gov and you find the grant that you want to apply to, and click on that Package tab, you can then click on Create Workspace. In this process, you'll be prompted to log in with your grants.gov credentials. So definitely make sure that is handy. You'll then create the name of this application just for yourself to kind of create this workspace essentially for your BFRDP application. And so again, Workspace has all of the parts and pieces that the application package does. It's just in a different kind of format. So when you first log into Workspace and create your application, you'll see the SF424 and SF424B and all of the different pieces and areas of the application package to fill out. So this is the SF424. So you might recognize some of the information here, and I apologize if it's a bit small, but on the left-hand side it has the list of the different sections, and these also again correspond to what you would see on the SF424 in the application package. So it's just kind of a different view of looking at these different pieces of the application to submit. So you can walk through each of the different sections, entering the information needed, and kind of move through your application that way. When it comes to the budget, in Workspace, you will download the budget form. And when you do download, it comes in the form of a PDF. So this is the first page of that PDF, and it indicates that it's a Workspace form. And then this is the budget form itself through that Workspace form. So it looks just the same. It's all the same required fields and information that you'll need to enter just kind of comes through in a different format. So for the budget in Workspace, you'll then save what you have done and upload that back into your Workspace application. And once you have submitted your application, you will be able to track your application. So back in grants.gov, under the Applicants tab, you can click on Track My Application so that you can check on the status of submitted applications that you have sent. And I wanted to point to a number of resources. Grants.gov has a lot of training videos and information, so I would highly suggest checking that out. They have training videos around the application package as well as Workspace, and they are available for technical support and assistance. So here's just a few URLs of where you can find more information about that and more support. You can also always just search for grants.gov support or grants.gov training and easily find these resources. If you do have any technical questions regarding the application, I would suggest using this email, electronic@nifa.usda.gov. There are a number of contacts, and they are listed in the RFA of who the programmatic contacts are, as well as the awards management division contacts. And so you can reach out to them at any time and ask, depending on your question, if it's more content related or programmatic versus more around the finance or budget piece of your application. But again, the contacts listed here on this slide are around anything technical specifically for grants.gov. And so I wanted to just point out the pieces of the narrative that are required. And so while this webinar is more around the technical aspects of submitting your application, it is of course important to point out the pieces of the narrative that are required. So again, this is on page 15 of the RFA. where it talks about your project narrative. So you'll want to make sure that you're reading through, of course, the information about the content that you need to include in these sections, and make sure that you're following how many pages they recommend using of your narrative for each of these sections. They do limit the narrative to 16 pages overall, but again, they give guidelines of how many pages you should use for the introduction and how many pages for objectives, etc. So it's definitely great to kind of read closely through the RFA and ensure you're including all of the necessary pieces. In terms of the additional bullet point that I've included at the bottom, so these correspond to specific circumstances. You can submit as a resubmitted application, in which case you'll have the opportunity to include a one-page response to previous review, where you'll get to kind of explain how you've incorporated the feedback from the previous application that was not funded in order to strengthen your current proposal. And then there's prior BFRDP accomplishments, which you can include only if your project director for the proposal that you're submitting this round has been substantially involved in a previous BFRDP project. So that's just another area where you have the opportunity to explain a bit more about why you're well positioned to execute this project this time around. Some additional key considerations to just keep in mind. There is, as I'm sure you know, a 25% match for BFRDP. So you'll want to make sure all your matching sources are well secured. There are no contingencies for match, meaning that you basically can't plan for money coming in the future. It has to be matching dollars or in-kind or donations that you can document and identify now. Definitely know your audience. Who are you reaching with your project? Make sure that that's really clear. In terms of your collaboration plan, the importance of strong partnerships can't be emphasized enough. So definitely make sure you're working with partners that have experience with the audience that you plan to be working with. Evaluation and outcomes are very important to make sure you have really strong evaluation plan, strong outcomes that, of course, correspond with the results verification system, the reporting system. And do your homework. Make sure that you're looking at what already is out there, what similar work exists. They also make a point in the RFA to say that Farm Answers, which is kind of their clearinghouse of information and resources around BFRDP projects, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of curriculum and different resources that you can utilize and tap into. So, don't reinvent the wheel. Use what already exists to help your project be as successful as possible. And then evaluation criteria. They do in the RFA explain which sections and which evaluation criteria are weighted with how many points. So that's helpful to see, but they are also looking for a holistic view of all of the sections of the application and all of the pieces involved. And submit early. It can't be stressed enough to definitely get into the system and submit as early as possible. The grant packages are very large, and if you have a slow internet connection or a spotty internet connection, even if it's just randomly for that day that you're trying to submit, all of these things can kind of interfere to make the submission process a little more technically challenging. So definitely make sure you have plenty of time to submit. Grants.gov will check for errors before submitting. So as we looked at that the button in the application package previously, you'll have the chance to check for errors and ensure that you're including everything that you need to, everything that's required to submit. But you'll want to then have time to fix anything that needs to be fixed. So it's highly recommended to try and submit at least a week before the deadline. I know that that's not always possible, but as much as you can aim for very early submission, it will just help you in the long run. So again, that's February 8th, 2018 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So there's still just about, I guess, a couple months to continue putting together your proposals, but early, submit early. So I've included just a couple links to additional websites with resources, places you can go for more information and assistance. There's, of course, new entries, BFRDP website, which you're welcome to check out. Again, we have the online self-assessment tool, the FAQ portal, other resources, and links to past webinars that we've conducted. So you're welcome to check out any of those resources. This is kind of a long URL, but I wanted to include it as well. It's around the grants.gov applicant training specifically. I think I included something similar in a previous slide, but this is a great one if you are looking for further information or resources about those technical pieces of applying. So diving a bit further into the application package as well as the workspace, this would be a great place to go and resource to look at. And you can always send me an email if you have any questions, kristen.aldrich@tufts.edu. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction and help out in whatever way that I can. And we have plenty of time here for questions. A few have already come through, but feel free to keep sending through the chat box any questions you might have, and I'll kind of walk through them now and see if I can answer some of these questions that you've submitted. So one note came through. I got an email from USDA saying the start dates are typically in August. So I had mentioned the September 30th start date. Again, I think I read the language from the RFA. It does indicate that the effective date of the grant shall be no later than September 30th. So that could certainly mean an August start date. It just can't be any later than 9/30/2018. It looks like the required fields are not highlighted in Workspace. For example, do we fill in the date submitted field? The date submitted field is actually, I think, effectively an internal field of when it was actually submitted, your application. So that would not be a required field. Yeah, I would have to kind of look a bit more closely at the Workspace fields to see if it is accurately pointing out the required fields. I'd say either way, really comb through it and make sure that you're answering everything that you need to be. I do know even in the application package, in the legacy PDF application package version, there are some areas that are not highlighted in yellow to indicate that they're required, but you do need to include them and submit them. And some of them are kind of dependent. The ones I'm thinking of at the moment are facilities and resources and equipment, and those are attachments that would go near where the other attachments field is. So you definitely want to include those and ensure that you're including any relevant attachments and such, but they might not be pointed out as required. So anyway, again, all the more reason to make sure you're really combing through the RFA, reading through all the language of what is relevant and required for your proposal and for your submission, and make sure that you're including all of that in the corresponding fields. So for the FAQs, will you be posting FAQs for the 2018 grant? I've only been able to find the 2017 FAQs. So the FAQs that are listed on our FAQ portal on New Entry's website, we can kind of take a closer look back through those. I think a lot of them are still relevant for the 2018 grant, but we can certainly remove any references to 2017 that might not be relevant for this year's application. If there's another resource with FAQs and the latest version is 2017 that has come from NIFA, they may have just not put out a newer version of that yet. Who's the best person to call about putting together budgets and matching? So that would definitely be the contacts at the Awards Management Division, and they are listed in the RFA on page 31. It talks about administrative and business contacts. So that would be Adrian Wooden and Susan Bowman, and they are both at the Awards Management Division of NIFA. Their information, again, is listed in the RFA, so you can find that on page 31 of the 2018 BFRDP RFA. Is there a place to see an example budget for new projects or look at previous projects and farm answers? You know, I'm not sure that they have publicly posted project budgets. So yeah, that's actually a great question, and I know that that's an area, you know, where many people have a lot of questions on how to approach the budget and making sure that they're entering everything correctly, and also is it appropriate for this kind of project and that kind of thing. I'm not aware of a resource like that, but Farm Answers would be an excellent place to look to see if there are any additional guidelines around putting together your budget. But yeah, again, I'm not sure that there are examples of actual previous project budgets. How many applications does this program typically attract, and how many are funded? That is a great question, and I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I do know that NSAC, and I'm going to get their acronym wrong, but NSAC is a great resource for information like that. And I'm going to see if I can pull that up now, actually. The National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, they, I know, have put out information and reports around the different grant programs, and they actually have put out a report somewhat recently around the BFRDP grant program specifically. So perhaps in my follow-up email following this webinar, I can include information that links back to NSAC and the research that they've done, because I think that they might have that information. Okay. I am unclear on the match requirement. The RFA says there is no match required, yet you refer to a 25% match. Can you clarify, please? Thanks. So I'm not sure where you may have seen that there was no match requirement in the RFA. I'm going to try to find the page that it references the 25% match here, but that is, yeah, on page 10 of RFA for the BFRDP fiscal year 2018 RFA, page 10, it's part 3, section B, cost share or matching, and it requires a 25% match, and that's outlined in there. So I'm not sure where the conflicting information may have been, but again, that's in the RFA on page 10. Okay, I watched the grants.gov YouTube video about managing participant access in Workspace, and it had a number of different access options. But when I log into Workspace, I only get the option to access all forms or only non-budgetary forms when I click Manage Access. I'm not entirely sure on that one. So it sounds like it might be showing only limited information, or rather, it's showing access to all forms. Yeah, I'm not sure. That sounds like it might be a user or access issue. So I would definitely suggest reaching out to perhaps electronic@nifa.usda.gov. They might be able to provide more technical information or support on that issue. And let's see, new, meaning this is the first year we are doing the project. I feel like I may have missed a first part of that question. But if you have if you're submitting as a new application, in the RFA they explain what the different types of application mean and how they define that. So in the RFA on page 8, it talks about types of applications, and a new application would be any project that has not been previously submitted to the program, or an application from a previously funded BFRDP project that has completed its project work and is applying for a continuation or starting a completely new project. So that was language right from the RFA on page 8 about a new application. Do you know what distinguishes a resubmitted application or new submission? What needs to be the same or different from the previous year? So again, in the RFA on page 8 is where it talks further about new application versus resubmitted application. A resubmitted application they define as an application that had previously been submitted to BFRDP but not funded. And then it goes on to explain the project directors must respond to the previous review panel summary in that response to review portion. So in terms of the difference between a previously submitted application that was not funded and should you submit as resubmitted or new, I think it might depend upon the project itself and if there is significant change to the project that you want to submit this time around, and if it's overall kind of in the spirit of the original application, and you know, and not a lot has changed aside from whatever portions of it you want to strengthen based on the feedback you received or other aspects of the project that you want to maybe strengthen or improve. If overall it's essentially the same project, then you could certainly submit as resubmitted. If it's deviating greatly from a previously submitted project, and also as I was just reading from the RFA, as they explain, if it's a project that had been previously funded and completed, you can submit as a new application, even if it is a continuation of that project. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit. I know that can get somewhat confusing. Is there a way to download your FAQs, or can they only be seen by clicking on one question at a time? Yeah, we don't have an easy way to download the FAQs on our website. I do believe if you go to our website, nesfp.org/BFRDP, there, let's see here, and into the FAQ portal, there should be, right, so if you filter by any, yes, it does have just the questions, and then you'd need to click each question in order to reveal the answer. But you can search by a different category. So for example, I'm on the website now, and if I click on filter by category scope of work, then it automatically opens and reveals all the answers to all the questions that apply to that category. So I hope that makes sense. But you otherwise would need to click on each question. So I'm getting some conflicting information about the cost sharing or match requirement that someone said from grants.gov. It said cost sharing or matching requirement, no. So again, I'm not sure exactly where you're finding that information. I am under the understanding that a match of 25% is required for BFRDP. I haven't heard any other information that conflicts with that, so maybe we can follow up after the webinar just to clarify the source of that information. If your match is higher than the minimum required, does that improve the chances of getting funded? I would say not necessarily. I don't think it necessarily improves your chances of getting funded. However, if you have multiple sources of match that could be applied to your project, then that's all the better for you if you are to be funded. If something were to happen or if they had any question about some of the match that you had submitted in your original application, you may have other sources that you can pull from, which would then just make the whole process easier for you and for the awards management division upon funding. How to bridge the matching cost when you need to pay salaries from the grant. Asking for a matching cost is a barrier for a lot of people and organizations to apply for. Is there something we can do to skip that requirement in the future? Unfortunately, the only thing I can think of to potentially skip that requirement in the future would be, I guess, talking with the folks at NIFA, talking with, you know, potentially your policy people or legislators, trying to advocate for a BFRDP grant program that is more flexible in that regard due to this issue. It certainly is a barrier for a lot of people to be able to apply when there is the matching piece. So beyond kind of advocating for that and trying to get them to change that in the program, you know, it's something that comes down from the USDA and then to NIFA and then to BFRDP. So I think it's a matter of kind of, again, yeah, advocating for what would work best for the folks that are applying for this grant program. Let's see. Is there a benefit to submitting as new versus resubmitted if you fall somewhere in between? Yeah, again, with the new versus resubmitted, it's just kind of gray, and I know that's not a great answer, but it really just depends on the project you're submitting. I don't know that there's necessarily an advantage to one versus the other. I think, you know, if you're submitting as a resubmitted application, you get that extra chance in that additional page, response to previous review, to talk about how you've incorporated the feedback from the panel when you were reviewed previously and how you're using that to strengthen your project. So you do have another page, you know, of narrative to submit with your application. So that might be one reason to do resubmitted, but I would definitely say, you know, take a hard look at the project that you're submitting, and if it truly is, you know, again, still in the spirit of that original project that you had submitted before, then resubmitted could certainly be the right type of application for you. If we are including match from a partner, do we need to fill out a subaward budget form for that? Or are those forms only for grant funds? So yeah, if you have a subaward and the subawardee is providing match, you will include that in your subaward budget form. So you have in the budget form, you have your federal column and your non-federal column, and the non-federal column is essentially match. So that's where you would enter that and indicate that. What types of in-kind matching are considered appropriate? For one thing, anything that is allowable for this grant to be included in your request would be allowable for match. So that's one kind of initial guideline to use when considering if something would be eligible to be used as match or not. And follow up, if we provide office admin equipment but not cash salaries. So office or admin equipment, I guess depending on where that might land in your budget, you could certainly use that as match. I guess saying, depending where that lands in your budget, I say that only because it sounds like it could potentially be part of your indirect costs. But if those are specific line items that you're calling out in your budget, you can certainly set those as match and include them in your non-federal column. I think for additional match questions or budget questions, I would recommend asking the Awards Management Division, those couple of administrative and business contacts in the RFA. Again, Adrienne Wooden and Susan Bowman. They're the best people with kind of the final say on any budget-related questions. I think a few more questions here. So yes, this presentation and PowerPoint will be available after the webinar. So again, you'll receive via email, and then we'll also post on our website the slides for the presentation, as well as the recording of the webinar. Can you review the differences between the two types of grants that are part of this RFP? So there's the standard grant, and then there's the Education Enhancement Team grant. And so those two project types are outlined on page 9 of the RFA. The standard grant is a maximum of $200,000 per year for up to 3 years. And then the Education Enhancement Team project is the same. The maximum award is $200,000 per year for up to 3 years. I think looking at the goals of those two particular projects would be most beneficial. Education Enhancement Team grant projects are kind of building on, and they outline the specific projects, building on some existing projects that have happened in the past. So those are a bit more, from my understanding, kind of research-intensive projects versus your standard grant, which is more kind of, again, from my understanding, kind of on the ground, beginning farmer training. So I would definitely, again, suggest kind of looking back through the RFA and how they describe those two programs. But those, yeah, those are the two that you can apply for this year. And what's the difference between matching support letter and the 25% match? So the 25% match is, and again, I will follow up and clarify that this is accurate, but 25% match, essentially when you have finalized the amount that you are asking for, that you're requesting for your proposal and your project, you need to then match 25% of that budget in other secured funds or in-kind donations. A matching support letter would be just a document that outlines the commitment that a partner is making to providing this match, be it in cash or in kind or another kind of donation. So again, the matching support letters are actually not required as part of your application for this year's RFA. You do need to have that documentation on hand, and you need to list out the sources of match, but you don't need to submit the letters, those matching kind of pledge letters of commitment, along with your application. But you definitely do need to make sure that you have those sources for that 25% match identified. So I think that is all the questions. Again, feel free to send me an email or contact me with any other follow-up questions you might have. Thank you all so much for taking the time to hear a bit more about the BFRDP application process today. Again, great resources available on grants.gov and also through BFRDP, NIFA, and their website as well. And of course, some resources on our website, nesfp.org/BFRDP. You'll be seeing an email from me shortly with the webinar recording, the presentation, and resources. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.